Hello, everyone. Welcome to MMA at Midnight. I'm your host, Shant Yeretzian. In this week's episode, we're going to talk about the fights coming up on Saturday with the Bellator 192, Rory MacDonald versus Douglas Lima, and Chael Sonnen versus Rampage Jackson, as well as the UFC in Boston, UFC 220 with Stipe Miocic versus Francis Ngannou for the heavyweight belt, and also Daniel Cormier defends his light heavyweight belt against Volkan Ozdemir. We're going to get into those, and we're also going to have another segment of Midnights of Our Past. In this week's episode, we're going to talk about Pride FC Bushido 1, so stay tuned for that. Let's get started with the Bellator 192. This is actually a pretty stacked card. There's a lot of fights on it from top to bottom on the main card. We'll get started with there's Aaron Pico. He's making his third fight, his third MMA appearance, and this one's going to be against Shane Crutchin. Not too much on him. He has a 12-3 record. He's a WSOF veteran. He's fought there. It's his Bellator debut, but he has the more experience over Aaron Pico. Aaron Pico is coming off his first round knockout over Justin Lin, and we remember his pro debut against Zach Freeman that didn't go too well, but he looked really good in his last fight where he got that knockout. So I'm curious to see what he looks like in this fight, so keep an eye on him. In the next fight, we have Goichi Yamauchi versus Michael Chandler. Don't sleep on Goichi in this fight. I think he has a really good chance of winning. Chandler hasn't fought since he lost his belt to Brent Primus in that injury, where he had that leg injury. So we don't know what type of Chandler is going to come out, but he seems pumped as always. He's always game. You know, he's one of those fighters where you don't need to tell him to, like, go out there. Like, his trainers don't need to, like, get him pumped up or anything. He's always ready to go. You know, he's fired up. You know, it doesn't matter who his opponent is. But Goichi, do not sleep on this dude. This dude has some of the best submissions. His submissions are sick. He has 18 submission wins in his career. He's on a 3-fight win streak, all of them by submission, all finishes. You know, he submitted Ryan Couture. He submitted Adam Piccolotti. So he's doing really well right now. So don't be surprised if he catches Chandler in some bad situations on the ground and possibly even submits him. Chandler's always game, like I said, but Goichi Yamauchi is very tricky on the ground. So watch out for his submissions. Also, another fight to watch is Henry Corrales versus Georgi Karakhanyan. Henry Corrales, he had his last fight against Nohad Lawat, where he won a decision. He came into Bellator undefeated, but he had a lot of really tough fights when he first started in Bellator. You know, he lost his debut against Daniel Strauss. He lost to Patricio Pitbull. You know, those are tough guys. Like, he was fighting like the best of the best. So he had a little bit of a rough run, but I feel like now that he's had a chance to build himself up, he's doing really well. And Georgi Karakhanyan, he's always game fighter. He's exciting. He beat Daniel Pineda in his last fight, but he's always had mixed results when it comes to fighting top-level competition. But these are both guys that are going to build up. They're trying to break through the top. So keep an eye on this fight. We have Douglas Lima, who's defending his belt against Rory MacDonald. This is an awesome fight. Rory MacDonald, he's exciting as hell, and he's going to bring it. But Douglas Lima is the most underrated welterweight. He was on a 3-fight win streak. He's been on a tear for years. Like, he's been doing really well. It just, unfortunately, no one sees him or talks about him. You know, being under the Bellator banner, he doesn't get as much as exposure as if he was in the UFC. But all the hardcore fans know how good Douglas Lima is. So don't sleep on him and write him off like Rory MacDonald's gonna walk all over him, because I don't see that happening. I don't know who's gonna win, but it's gonna be a tough fight. It's gonna be a war. I love these welterweight wars. It seems like guys like Rory MacDonald, Douglas Lima, you know, the Robbie Lawlers, Carlos Condits. You know, there's a lot of those guys at welterweight that put on those exciting wars, and I think we're going to be in store for another one. So that's definitely a fight to watch. There's Rampage Jackson versus Chael Sonnen in the main event. That's part of the heavyweight tournament coming up. Bellator has been putting out the countdown episodes for it following Chael and Rampage, which have been entertaining. So you can always check those out. One thing that kind of worries me, I know there's a huge size difference, and Rampage is a lot bigger than Chael, but I'm more concerned that Chael doesn't necessarily show up when he's kind of buddy buddy or doesn't have any like anger towards his opponent. Because we see Chael when there's like a guy he's fighting he doesn't like, he brings it. He shows up like he's fired up. But you see against like fighters like Rashad, who he's like friends with, and he doesn't have any beef with or anything like that. He kind of just puts on these lackluster performances and doesn't show up. So I'm kind of worried that that might happen with Rampage, but we don't know. Chael might come out there, might have a chip on his shoulder because this is part of the heavyweight tournament. Rampage is the bigger guy. So Chael might just come out there, on fire, guns blazing, trying to take Rampage down, swinging and trying to shoot. Whatever he's going to have to do to try and get Rampage to the ground, he's going to do. So that'll be good to see. And maybe we'll get to see Rampage fired up too again, just like how we used to get on the old Pride tournaments and stuff. Maybe this will light a fire under him. Maybe he hasn't been as motivated over the past few years to fight, but this heavyweight tournament, it gets the fans worked up and pumped. Like, I'm excited for it, and I'm sure these fighters are excited for it too. So definitely keep an eye out for that. So a lot of good fights on the Bellator 192. You definitely want to watch it, DVR it, whatever you got to do. Don't miss out on those fights. Those are going to be really good. Okay, let's get into the UFC 220. This also has a lot of good cards on it. There's also a lot of local guys fighting on the card from Boston. We got Calvin Kattar, we got Kyle Bonchnak, and also Rob Font. So those are guys to keep an eye out that the fans are going to be cheering for. One of the fights to keep an eye out on the undercard, we have Sabah Homasi versus Abdul Razak Al Hassan. This is a rematch. Their first fight ended in like a controversial stoppage where Homasi kind of like fell to the ground, and like at a quick glance it looked like maybe it was a punch that dropped him, but when you watch the replay you see nothing really happen. He kind of just dropped down and was like grabbing a leg, and the fight was stopped. It was stopped too early. It was premature stoppage. So it's good to see that he gets that rematch. We'll see what happens in this. Al Hassan is a tough opponent. He's his only loss, he has an 8-1 record. His only loss is to a split decision to Omari Akhmedov. So that was a close fight. So I'm interested in this fight, see what happens. We also have Thomas Almeida versus Rob Font. This is going to be a great fight because Rob Font, he has that knockout power. He always brings the fight. He's exciting. He's really technical in his hands. And Thomas Almeida is a killer. Like, the only two people he's lost to were Cody Garbrandt by KO and a decision loss to Jimmy Rivera. Besides that, he's pretty much Thomas Almeida's run through everybody. He's a really, really well-rounded fighter. He's aggressive. So this is going to be a great fight. Rob Font, he's a good dude. I used to train at Sityok Tong. Anytime I would bump into him there, he'd always say hi to me, even though I'm a nobody. He's always super nice guy. So it'll be exciting to see what happens in this fight. So Thomas Almeida, Rob Font, that's going to be fireworks. We got Daniel Cormier versus Volkan Ozdemir for the light heavyweight championship. Daniel Cormier, he's coming off that loss with John Jones, so we'll be interested to see maybe has his chin recovered. Is he going to be able to take a shot like he used to? But DC, he was having a blast at the open workouts this week. He was getting the fans all fired up. He was having a good time. DC he doesn't look like he's feeling any pressure. Volkan was very quiet. This is all kind of new to him, the media attention, the spotlight. So it's kind of interesting to see if that pressure of the spotlight's going to get to Volkan. Also, cardio. He's had these quick finishes, these quick knockouts. If that doesn't happen in this fight, if he doesn't knock DC out in the first round, DC is known for tiring guys. His wrestling, his slams, his grind, he doesn't let you breathe. So it'll be a lot of questions answered about Volkan's cardio and see what he can do in those later rounds if it gets there. But don't sleep on Volkan. His power is there. One shot, it doesn't even have to land clean. We've seen his other fights. If it just clips you, grazes you, catches you behind the ear or anything, you're going down. It doesn't need to be a clean shot to the chin. So don't sleep on Volkan. That light heavyweight belt, that fight's going to be awesome. And in the main event, we have the heavyweight championship on the line with Stipe Miocic defending his belt against Francis Ngannou. Francis is a monster. His punching power, we've heard about him being like the hardest puncher ever. His hands are really good. At the open workout, he was tearing up the mitts. He's got power. He's got speed. His combinations are really good. He's even got elbows. He was showing a lot of elbows. So if you see Stipe trying to clinch, if he gets sloppy, don't be surprised if Ngannou hits him with some elbows, like in close in the clinch. And those look devastating. I would not want to get hit with one of those elbows. Francis is a big dude, and he's so fast with his power. So that's something to watch. I'm guessing Stipe is going to kind of have the same game plan like he had against Mark Hunt. He's going to strike with him a bit, but he's going to use it to try and get him to the ground and pound a little bit, work him, tire him out. And it'll be interesting if he can do it, to see what happens and how Ngannou's cardio is, how he does getting back up to his feet. So we'll see about that. That's going to be interesting. A lot of questions going to be answered. But a lot of people are already picking Ngannou by knockout. I wouldn't be surprised if it happens. Like you said, just like Volkan, he doesn't have to land clean. He just needs to touch you, and you'll go to sleep. So I know a lot of people are expecting knockouts on this main card. There's a lot of fights that very well may end in a knockout. So keep an eye on it. This main event is going to be possibly filled with knockouts, this main card. So definitely tune into UFC 220 as well. Those are going to be good. There's another segment of Midnights of Our Past. This week we're going to do Pride Bushido 1. This was something Pride decided to do something different. It was kind of like an event to showcase up-and-coming fighters that maybe are coming up, or they just need a little more hype or a few more fights to get to that next level, or we're coming off a loss. They had everything in the Bushido events. They did put a lot of stars on there too. Like this first one, it was stacked. This first one, they actually had Team Japan versus Team Gracie, which was awesome. It was a 5 versus 5 teams. The head coaches of the teams, Hoist Gracie of Team Gracie, and Yoshida was the head coach of Team Japan. And those two had their fight in I believe it was the previous year before at Shockwave. So they still had their grudge match. They wanted a rematch with each other. So there was a little beef between Yoshida and Hoist Gracie, and the teams were actually pretty cool. It was Carlos Newton was on Team Japan with Dunkan Junsuke Mishima, Kazuhiro Nakamura, Daiju Takase, and Kazuhiro Hamanaka. And on Team Gracie, it was Henzo Gracie, Half Gracie, Daniel Gracie, Rodrigo Gracie, and Hein Gracie. Also, there was a lot of so in that tournament it was really interesting. We'll start off with those. I'll go through. There was a lot of other great matches on this card. Shogun, Alexander Emelianenko, Mirko Krokop. We'll get into those after. First, I want to cover the Team Japan versus Team Gracie. The Hein Gracie fight, this was really exciting. This one ended in soccer kicks. Poor Hamanaka, those Pride rules, those soccer kicks is just perfect for someone like Hein Gracie, who's violent, aggressive, similar to like a Vandalay. Hein Gracie was always out there to kind of take his opponent out. So that's an interesting matchup. Daiju Takase versus Rodrigo Gracie. This is a really good match, technical. Daiju Takase was actually this was the fight after he tapped out Anderson Silva to a triangle choke. So Daiju Takase was riding high after that Anderson Silva win into this fight with Rodrigo. So that was interesting. And Kazuhiro Nakamura versus Daniel Gracie, those guys always, were exciting in Pride. That's a good fight. Dakan Junsuke Mishima versus Ralph Gracie. Mishima, this dude's a character. I'm sure some of you remember him. He fought in UFC a couple times. He fought Kenny Florian and Joe Stevenson. He ended up losing to both of them, but that he did fight in the UFC, so some of you might remember him from there. He's a little goofy. He's quite the character. He was an entertainer, and they love that over there in Japan. And also Carlos Newton versus Renzo Gracie. This was a great match. These guys went back and forth. A lot of submission attempts, strikes, and this was an important fight back then. This happened in 2003. At 170, this was an important fight at 170 back then. Carlos Newton was a top welterweight, and so was Renzo Gracie. So that was an important fight. Let's get into some of the other matches that were on here. You had Alexander Emelianenko making his pro debut against he made it against Asuero Silva on this card. That was an exciting fight. Shogun Mauricio Shogun Hua making his pro debut against Akira Shoji. He ended up knocking him out. That was a great fight. To see guys like Shogun, they need a stage, a platform to build them. And they had these Bushido events for guys like that who are coming up or making their appearance. So there was a lot of good ones with that. Also, Sergey Haritonov was on this card. A lot of people know Sergey's, another strong Russian heavyweight fighter. And also in the main event, it was Mirko Cro Cop versus Dos Caras Jr., which was a legendary fight. Cro Cop ended up KOing him with a huge head kick. Dos Caras was wearing his pro wrestling mask, and Mirko ended up head kicking him and splitting him. You could see the blood running down his mask, and the Pride officials trying to take his mask off while he was unconscious because he caused the big cut on his head from the head kick. Mirko was on a tear. The fight before that, he head kick knocked out Igor Vovchanchin. That was another one of his legendary highlight reel knockouts, head kick knockouts, and he just added another one to it with his Dos Caras knockout. So this was definitely a legendary event. And Bushido went on to be the lightweight showcase event where they would showcase all the lightweight guys, it helped build them up. I know a lot of people talk about Demetrius and a lot of the other lighter weight classes in the UFC having trouble building up their name. Pride, they had the Bushido that they kind of leaned on to build those stars. It turned Gomi into a huge stars and a lot of other fighters as well. It gave them a showcase to come on, and they also always put on heavyweights and light heavyweights. They'll throw them on here. Vanderlei has fought on Bushido, Shogun, Fedor, I believe it was the 6th Bushido, he fought TK on there. They would always put other fights on there to draw eyes to the card, and it would give eyes to those smaller weight class fighters as well. So that's something maybe the UFC could do if they have trouble building lighter weight classes in the future. Maybe have showcase events with those lighter weight classes, but also put something that'll draw the fans to the event to see those. Like a big name like Mirko, Fedor, how they used to bring in their big stars, Shogun. That's definitely a good way to draw attention to those lighter weight classes. I feel like they had a good formula with Bushido, and it was a great show. I always loved watching them. In between the big Pride events, that we always had those Bushido events in between that were very nice. Thank you guys for joining me for another episode of MMA at Midnight. Join me for the post-fight show for the Bellator 192 and for UFC 220 this weekend. You enjoy the fights, and we'll see you next time. Bye.